Hi, Algo fan. Welcome to the Beginner TypeScript Bootcamp, day 4. How are you doing today? Who is ready for the session 4? This is our last session, and I have been talking with Joe. And this was a tough month because at the beginning we have the intro bootcamp, then the Python beginner bootcamp, and we are closing this interesting month for all the algo devs with this final session of the beginner TypeScript bootcamp. I know I'm sad too, and I have a lot of fun during this month learning a lot. But today, after the session, the challenge is to try to understand all the concepts that Joe explained to us, because during these boot camps, we use many native features that Algorand offered to us, which are a great value when we are creating our own projects. So I know after this session, you will start playing around, and then crazy errors will appear. So you can contact us on Discord. And the most important part is how we as a community can support each other, because sometimes we don't have enough time to answer all the questions, but maybe you already face a similar error, so you can help to answer other questions. And before we start with the content, we have some last announcements. The first one, at the end of today's session, I will share the link so you can claim the certificate of completion. I will explain you the process to claim them. And this certificate is a verifiable credential that you can add to your LinkedIn profile. I also will explain how you can do it. The intermediate TypeScript bootcamp will take place on May 27th. And Joe, what are the things that we are going to add, the functionality that we are going to add during the intermediate ones?
Yeah, so the main thing we're going to work on is making our digital marketplace function a little bit more like a marketplace. So right now, anytime someone wants to list a asset, they have to create a completely new contract. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a contract that can keep track of all the different listings. So we can have a front end that you go to it, and it'll show you all the different listings by anyone that made a listing, much like you would expect most marketplaces to work. And from there, after we've added that functionality, we're going to go a bit deeper into the process of asset creation. So how do we mint an asset that follows our standards on Algorand? How do we pin our files on IPFS using Crust? And then we'll also focus a little bit on how to go into production. So how do we switch to testnet and start getting users to test it there? What do we need to do to go into mainnet? And so we'll be talking more about how we take the concepts that we learned today and then apply them in a more like real world scenario. So that's when you can really start building your own apps and bringing them to production.
I love those alphas, and as you mentioned, it's important to start thinking on bringing this solution to production. So over here, we learn the basics. We start doing and deploying our first smart contracts on localnet, but then the next step is to start playing with testnet and then mainnet. So we have 4 weeks to practice, ask questions on Discord, and get ready to add more features in the intermediate session, as you just mentioned. And today is the day to share the certifications on your socials, and don't forget to tag us. And the last announcement, and this is important, don't miss the opportunity. You still have to register to the Global Hackathon. So we are ready for the last session, Joe. Thank you so much. And it's time to keep learning together. And today we are going to create the user interface. So it's a pretty amazing session.
All right, perfect. So before we actually pick up where we left off yesterday, I figured I'd show a preview of what we're building is going to look like in the end, just so we all have an idea of what it will look like. So let me go ahead and share this. Actually, let me do a refresh. So this is what an app basically just building on top of the aggregate template will look like. Obviously, we're using React, so you can change basically everything and make it however you like. But here I'm using the AlgoKit template as closely as possible, just so we don't have too much code to write. But you can see here that we come to our website, and the first thing we're going to want to do is connect to our wallet. In this case, we are connecting to LocalNet. So I'm just going to connect to my LocalNet wallet. It's going to ask me for a password. I'm going to hit OK. And then from here, what I can do is I can now create a marketplace. So the first thing I need to do when I create a marketplace is define how expensive it will be to buy assets from my marketplace. So I can define a price. I'll say my price will be 2. I'm going to go ahead and create that. And then we'll see we've created a new app ID. And in the process, we also created an asset ID in our marketplace. And for now, we've just hard-coded to create a new asset and set 10 units of that asset. In the real world, you would want a user to be able to specify their own asset, but so we could focus more closely on the app, we just did that in the background. And then now as an end user, I can come over here and I can see there are 10 units left, and it cost 2 algo to buy one. So if I wanted to buy 5, that would be 10 algo. I can go ahead and buy that. And I can now see there's 5 units left. And I can go ahead and buy the remaining 5. And I'll now have the option to delete the app. Or if I'm just a user looking at the site, it'll tell me it's sold out. So this is ultimately what we're going to be building towards. And as we get into each component, we'll understand a little bit more about what exactly it's doing. But I just wanted to give the high-level overview before we jump back into the content. So without out of the way, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be picking up right where we left off yesterday. So yesterday, we ended the session with our methods.ts file that had the generic functions for interacting with our contract. And these are going to be the functions that we plug into React in order to interact with our contract directly from the front end. So I'm going to go ahead and share the video. And like always, post questions in the questions tab if you have any, and I will pause accordingly. So I'm going to start it, and then we're going to need to jump
now that we have
where we left off yesterday. I think it is right around here. So there's going to be a couple, like 30 seconds of overlapping content, but I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. And we're going to pick up right after we finish this methods.ts file.
And then we're going to call set app ID to 0, right? So again, much like in create, we want our front end to know when we've created the app, what the app ID is. And when we delete, we want our front end to know that we've deleted, and we can set the app ID to 0. Okay, so at this point, this is basically all the code that we're going to be writing for actually interacting with the app. Everything from this point on is going to be implementing it in React in the AlgoKit template. So if you aren't using the AlgoKit template or you aren't using React, you can kind of stop here. However, if you want to see how I actually take this into React, then we can continue on here. So again, what I've done is I've created that generic TS file in my source directory. But now what I want to do is I want to create a component that can take in those methods and actually execute them. So I'm going to create a new component here. And I'm going to call it method call.tsx. I'm going to, actually, to create this, I should show you kind of how I go about creating this. What we can do is we can kind of just copy and paste this wallet connect. And however, I'm just going to get rid of all the code that we're actually returning here. And we don't need any of this code. And I'm going to change this to method call. Change this to method call interface. And in my method call interface, I want to pass in a method function. And this is going to be an anonymous function that is going to be an async with a void return. And then, actually, yeah, let's just keep it like that for now. So then in my method call, I have method function, and this is going to be, oops. And what we're going to return is we're going to return a button. So I'm going to create a button here. And what we're going to do is we're going to put the loading text, or excuse me, put the text to be some text we pass in. So in our interface here, we're going to say text is going to be a string. Add our text here. And so in here, we're going to return, forgot method call. So in here, we're going to have a button that has our text. Now to align this with the rest of our style, we're going to give it a class name using our Tailwind components. So we're going to button with a margin of 2. And so we have a button where we specify the text, but what we want to do is we want to specify what happens when we actually click that button. And that is where this call, click call method function is going to come in. Oh, just method function. Okay. And so this is why, so if we come to our methods TS, this is why we have our functions return an async function. Our onClick is going to be executing the method function, and the method function we're going to be executing is this function that we return. Okay, now, of course, what we haven't done yet is actually call that function. So I'm going to say const call method function. This is going to be async function, and I'm going to say await method function. This will be call method function, and the reason why we're doing this is so we can set our loading spinner. So I'm going to come up here. I am going to create some state called loading. And this is going to be boolean that is false. We need to, need to import use state from React. Okay, so we're going to have a piece of state that tells the user whether the function's loading or not. And we're going to set loading to true before we call it, and then set loading to false after, right? So we are going to pass in our method function, which is going to be this async function. We're going to start loading, call the function, and once the function has finished, then as return has been confirmed on chain, we're going to set loading to false. And now we're going to use that loading value, and we're going to say, if we're loading, then we are going to return a span where the class name is equal to loading dash spinner. And if we're not loading, then we're going to return the text that we pass in. And if you're not familiar with React, this might be a little bit confusing, but we'll see how it all comes together in just a second when we implement our first button here. But in this React component, what we basically said is we're going to define a new React component that is simply a button. And when we click this button, we're going to call our method function that we get from our methods. And we are going to display to the user that we're loading while that function is being executed. So now at this point, we can go ahead and we can start modifying our home.tsx in order to actually, make use of these callback functions that we have, and of course, make use of this component. So we're going to come over to our home.tsx, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up the state that we're going to need, or at least some of the state that we're going to need for our app. So I'm going to come on over to, actually the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to delete the stuff we don't need. We don't need this demo modal, so we can get rid of that. And we can get rid of this. I'll just get rid of the whole thing. And we can get rid of our open demo modal. And so now if we were to go back, I think we're still running it. No, we're not. So if we do a npm run dev, and we come back here, we can see that we now just have our getting started in our wallet connect button. What I'm going to do is I'm also going to get rid of that getting started. So get rid of this here. And I'm just going to put this divider below wallet connect. So now if we go back, we see we have welcome to AlgoKit, blah, blah, blah. Then we have our wallet connect button that still works as it did before. And then we have our divider. And so below this divider, actually, before we get into modifying the front end anymore, let's talk a little bit about the state that we're going to use. We know, as we previously discussed, we want to persist the app ID in our state. So I'm going to have a new piece of state called app ID. And this is going to be a number. The default value is going to be 0. So in a React app, we're going to be saving our app ID. And what this is basically going to allow us to do is anytime we want our app ID to change, when we call set app ID, React will know to re-render our front end and update it. So once we've done that, we're going to go ahead and we're going to also instantiate our DM client. So const DM client goes new digital marketplace client. And we're going to resolve by ID. Again, much like our test, we resolve by ID, so we can tell which app ID we want to point to. In our case, we're going to point to our app ID. And then the sender, this is where things start to get a little bit different from our testing. Our sender, our address is going to be active address. And then we're going to use the signer. So what does this mean? Use Wallet is a wallet agnostic framework for integrating many different wallet providers in your app. So right now, our only wallet provider is going to be our local net, as we've seen. But by integrating Use Wallet now, in the future, when we switch to testnet, then we automatically, or testnet or mainnet, we automatically support other wallets like Para or DFly. And so we're going to use Wallet to get the address that the user connected and get the function that we need to sign the transactions for that user. And then we're going to pass in our, forgot to instantiate. The other thing we need is we need a const Algorand. And this is going to be give me 1 second. Let me just make sure right. So actually what we need to do is we need a const Algorand config, or get Algorand config from, actually we need to import that first. So I'm going to import const get algod config from void environment, and then our algod from void environment. That's going to be algod config. And then what we're going to do is we're going to get algorand from algokit dot, oh, and we need to import algokit. Import star as algokit from Algorand Foundation algokit utils. And we're going to import algokit.algorand client, the algorand client from config, pass in our algod config. Okay, so can kind of summarize, we've gotten our algod config from our environment. And if we take a look at what that actually means, here in our front end, we have this .env. So we know we're connecting to localhost. But in the future, if we wanted to test it, change it to testnet or mainnet, all we would have to do is change this env file. And so we get the environment from our env file. We instantiate our Algorand client, and then we use that to get our algod client or our marketplace client. Okay, and we're going to assert that this is not undefined, or assert that it is defined. And one more thing we're going to do, actually two more things we're going to do. So the first is after we've instantiated our Algorand client, we need to set the default signer to our signer from use wallet. And then we also need to configure algokit.config.configure, and we're going to say populate app call resources to true. Again, as I mentioned in our testing portion, in the future, this might not be needed, but it is needed for right now. So we're just going to set that to true. There's no harm in enabling it in the future. It will just be enabled by default. So enabling populate app call resource to be true. And then make sure we've set our DM client and we've created our Algorand client, and it knows the default signer function to use is from use wallet. And so now at this point, we can go ahead and start to think about how we want to implement our method call buttons. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I want to create some input that allows the user to define what app they want to connect to. So I'm going to come into my grid here, below my divider. I'm going to create a label. It's going to be AppId. And because this is going to be a tail1 component, we're going to say label, class name is label. And then we're going to create an input the type is going to be number. Class name, that'll be input and input bordered. Our value is going to be our app ID. And what we want to happen is when this value changes, we're going to add our on change. It's going to be equal to this callback function where we set app ID be e.currentTarget.value as number or 0. Okay, so what we've done is we've created an input that each time we change it, we're going to update the app ID that our app is connecting to. Okay, so now what we want to do is I'm going to create another divider. Oops. Oh, that's the wrong thing to copy. I want to copy this divider div. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start implementing my method call here. So I'm going to say if there's an active address, so the user has connected their address, and the app ID is equal to 0, then I am going to render a div, and this div is going to contain that method call, the method call component that I created. I'm going to say my method function, that is going to be this create function from our methods. So create, and we're going to be passing in our Algorand client, our DM client, our Algorand client. I need to go back to this TS. Actually, we can just look at the IntelliSense. So we need our Algorand client, our DM client, our asset ID. So we don't have that defined yet, but that's okay. Our unitary price, we don't have that defined yet either. Our quantity, which we also don't have defined. Our sender, it's going to be active address. And then passing in the set app ID function. Okay, so now we need to create some state for these three values. So I'm going to come back up here. And these are the values. So we're going to do const asset ID, set asset ID. It's going to be use state big int. By default, it's going to be URN. I'm going to do the same thing for unitary price. So unitary price, set unitary price. It's going to be use state big int URN. And finally, quantity, set quantity. That's also going to be use state big int, big int default value of 0. And what is this complaining about? Oh, and then our text is going to be create app. Okay, so if we come back over here and we connect our wallet, we'll now have this create app button. And so if I go ahead and click create app, let's see what happened here. Looks like we have a problem with one of the values we're passing in. So big int 000. Passing in our Algorand client, our DM client. So the ID, our unitary price, our active address, our set app ID. So let's see here, cannot convert undefined to a big int. It's happening at line 22. Oh, interesting. For some reason, it's our asset create method that is, let's go ahead and is it? Asset create, await Algorand, send asset create. Let me go back to the console here. Some live debugging. Maybe something happened upstream. Oh, this probably. Let me refresh and do that again. Okay, yeah, can't. For some reason, let's do a console log of our asset create. And this is very weird. I haven't seen this bug before where the asset create transaction isn't actually creating us an asset. Let me make sure I haven't typed anything here incorrectly. I don't think I have. Wait, Algorand send. Asset create. That should be working. Let me come back to my cheat sheet here. That is very bizarre. So let me pause and then we'll come back. Okay, so I realized what the problem was, and how I figured it out is if I, coming back here, I was logging the asset create return result, and if I go to my confirmations, or excuse me, go to my confirmation, I'll see that my asset, where is it? Asset index is undefined. But if I look at the transaction, I see here that there is no asset amount specified. And so that's happening because in my code, I'm passing a quantity of 0. So all I need to do to fix this is I'm just going to hard code my quantity to 10 right now. And I had planned to do that, but I just forgot about that. So I'm going to hard code my quantity to 10. And if we come back over here, this now should work. But it seems like we are missing something here. Oh, and because we forgot to change that. Okay, coming back, we do a reload. Let's refresh. And now we can see, so every time this pops up, that means the transaction is being signed. And now we can see that we've created our app. It just happens to be AppId 1234. But if I go ahead and I run this again, we can see here we create another app, 1240. Okay, so after that little bit of debugging, we can be sure that our create button is indeed working. So now what we want to do is we want to be able to allow the user to buy some assets from a marketplace that they go to. So as an end user, I want to be able to come to the site. I go, oh, I know I want to go to marketplace 1234, and it'll show you, the information for that marketplace. So I'm going to come back to my home.tsx. I'm going to come down here. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another set of code for when the app ID is not 0. So here I did active address and app ID not 0. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say when I have an active address, so when the user is connected, and app ID is not 0, I'm going to render a div here. And this is going to contain the inputs for when someone wants to buy it. So the first thing I need to do is tell them how much that thing costs, right? So I need to say label class name equals label. It's going to be price per unit. And then I'm going to have an input here. The type is just going to be text because we're going to be using a big int. Class name is going to be input ordered. And we are going to say that the value is going to be equal to our unitary price divided by big int 10 e to the 6th. So, oh, and we need to put this all as dot to string. Okay, so we're going to get our unitary price. And remember, our unitary price is always a microalgo. But for our end users, we want to show that value in algos. So we're going to divide that by 10 to the 6th. And one thing we're also going to do is we're going to update this to say read only is true. Actually, I don't think we need the equals true. We can just do read only. So now when we create our app, it'll show us the price per unit. But of course, that value right now is basically just always going to be 0 because we need to create a function for updating our unitary price. And to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to use something called use effect. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to create a new function or new use effect call. This is going to be a function. And how use effect works is basically we give it a list of variables, a list of state variables that we want to monitor. And when those variables change, we want our use effect function to be called. So I'm going to monitor the app ID. And whenever our app ID changes, I'm going to use our DM client. What is this? Oh, I need to import use effect. I'm going to use our DM client to get global state. And then I'm going to get my global state. This argument. And in my global state, what I'm going to do, I'm going to set the unitary price to global state dot unitary price dot as big int or 0 or 0 in. So whenever the app ID changes, we're going to ask the app to give us the unitary price. Now what I'm going to do I'm going to get the asset ID of the global state. So global state asset ID as big int or 0. And I'm going to set my asset ID. Oh, I haven't done that yet. Const useState big int 0n. Okay. So whenever my app ID changes, I want to get the unitary price and the asset ID and update my state. However, I'm going to also add in a catch here to set unitary price to 0 and set asset ID to 0. So if we encounter an error when getting our global state, we'll just set everything to 0 because we'll assume that that app isn't actually valid. Okay, so now if we come back down here, where were we? Our price per unit, our value will be unitary price. Asset ID. Oh, I did have set asset ID defined. My mistake. And so now, when we create our app, we'll see our unitary price, but it's still 0. And the reason it's still 0 is because we didn't in our create function. So if we come to create, we pass in a unitary price, but that is also still 0. So I'm going to create here, basically gonna, let me copy these 2 lines of code, bring it up to my method call. Need to do that. Except this label is going to be unitary price. And then this is going to be, let me make sure I do this right. Going to my cheat codes here. So this is going to be the same, except I'm going to say on change, we're going to take the change event, do set unitary price to big int e.current value current target dot value or 0. Okay. And so now if we come here, we set our app ID to 0. We can now input a unitary price. It's not letting me change it for some reason. No, we're going to set this type number. There we go. Value as number. Okay. And now we can, oh, we still can't change this. Why can we not change our unitary price here? Let's see. So we have our type as a number, class as an input, our value is the unitary price. Oh, and I actually did forget one thing. We're going to multiply this by 10e6 so we can get microalgo. it's still not clear to me why. Oh, I can change it now. That was weird. Okay, so now I'm going to say my unitary price to 2. If I create my app, we'll see my price per unit is now correctly showing as 2. Okay, so if I were to go to, let me get rid of this. That was 1258. Let's remember that. Get rid of this. We now have our create, but we go back to 1258, and it knows that the unit price for 1258 is 2. If I go to some other app, it's 0. Come back, it knows it's 2. Okay, so we have successfully created our create component. Now we still have this quantity hard coded. We could create another input and another state to change that. But we're just going to leave it hard coded for now. I don't want to spend too much time on just front end stuff because I really want to focus on algorithm specific stuff. But you can imagine how we can create the same exact thing for our quantity. So let's go back, come back to our original mission here of adding this buy component to our homepage here. So I'm going to create a new label, and in this label, this is going to be input where the user can specify how much they want to buy. So our desired quantity, and this is going to be an input much like this. Where send the value is going to be quantity to string. And when we change it, we're going to be set quantity to big int. Okay, so now if we come back, our user, when they're ready to buy, they can see the price per unit. Oh, actually, let me come to 1258 up again. You can see the price per unit and how much they want to buy for. Now, finally, we need to put this all together. And we need to be able to add in our method call component here. So we're going to come back and create a method call. And this time, however, our method function, so being create, we're going to do our buy function. And let's do import buy. And here we're going to pass in Algorand, DM client, our sender, which will be our active address, our app address, which we can get by algostk.get application address from our ID. Looks like we need to import algostk, so let me do that. Okay, so pass in our app address, then we pass in the quantity that we want to buy, the unitary price, and then our set. Oh, actually, we haven't done that yet. Okay, and the last thing we need to do is our units left. So I'm going to come up here, say const units left, set units left, will be uState big int 0n. And we come back down here and we pass in set units left. Get application address. Yep. Okay. And then for our text, say what we're actually going to do is we're going to make this a string, and we're going to say by quantity for do unitary price times big int quantity divided by big int 10e6 algo. Algo. Okay, so we take our unitary price, we multiply it by our quantity, and then we divide it by 10 to the 6 to convert our microalgo to algo. Now, if all goes according to plan, was it 1258? No, 1258. I set my desired quantity to 1. I can now buy 1 unit for 2 algo. If I set it for 100, it'll know that in order to buy 1,000, I need to pay 2,000. And we can see if I go ahead, I can create a new app where the unitary price is 10. And I say that 10, it knows 10 for 100 algo. Okay, so we're making some pretty good progress here. So we've integrated our buy function. And now really that's all that's left is to kind of pretty up the end user experience and then integrate our delete function. So what we want to do is right now, if I'm an end user and I come to this page, I have no way of knowing how much is left for me to buy. I could try to buy this many, and the front end, as far as the front end concerned, it would have no problem allowing me to do that because it has no way of telling me how much is left. So this is where that set units left function is going to come in handy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back up to my use effect function here, and I'm going to add a call algorand dot. Actually, let me do this outside of here. That'll probably make. Yeah, algorand dot account get asset information, and here we're going to do algos_decay dot application address for our app ID, and then we're going to get the asset ID. Then it's going to be info. We are going to pass in set units left info.balance. So what we're basically doing here is each time our app ID changes, we're going to read our global state to see what the asset is and what the unitary price is. But we're also going to check the balance of our app address and see how much asset it has. And so what I'm going to do here is I am going to create another set of fields. For this time, I'm just going to check. Actually, this should be below here. Oh, what's going on? Okay, this time I'm just going to check if there's an app ID. And then what I want to do is render information. So render information about the listing. So I'm going to return here a div, and I'm going to have label didn't end my div correctly. Let me copy my label stuff. This is going to be the asset ID. And let me get my read. Where's my read only? I'm going to copy this. Where's asset ID? Here for our value, we're going to say asset ID. To string. That's going to be read only. And then we're going to do the same thing for our unitary price. So we're going to copy that. Get myself a little more screen real estate here. Or excuse me, not unitary price. Units left. It's going to be units left to string. Oh, and then one thing I want to do is, where's the divider? I'm going to add a divider here. Okay, so on my app, I can now see my asset ID, how much is left, and as a user, I can now know if I try to buy 5, no, that didn't work. I think I know exactly why that didn't work. In my buy function, where is it? I need to set the extra fees here. So extra fee, this is going to be algokit.algos 0.001 for the inner transaction. So let me go ahead and try that again. And now I can see, so I bought 5 for 50 algo, and I can now see that there are 5 units left. So if I bought one more, there'd be 4 units left. If I bought 4, there'd be no units left. Okay, so and now what I want to happen is I want to add special logic for what to do when there are no units left. So let me first come down to here, and I'm going to update this to say if units left is greater than 0. And so now that stuff will disappear. What I basically want to do is I want to say if AppId is not 0 and units left is less than or equal to 0. It should never be less than, but you never know. Might as well just be safe. And units left is equal to 0. And then what we're going to do is we're going to say return a button that is sold out. So, and here I have a button, and we're going to say sold out. And our class name is going to be button disabled m-2. And we're going to say this is disabled. Okay, so now if we go back to our front end, we can see here we have this sold out button. Now, the last thing we need to do is we want to, if the end user that is connected to this, if they are the creator, if they are the person that created the marketplace, they're the seller, we want to give them the option to close it. So we're going to create for now, let's just copy this same condition. And we'll say this will be a method call. And the method function is going to be deleteApp. And the text is going to be deleteApp. And I need to pass in set ID. What else am I missing? Oh, and of course, the client. And also my Algorand client. Okay. So now, if I, oh, this is probably the same issue that I had before with the fees. I need to come here and I need to, here again, we set the fees a little bit differently in our app client. This is going to be improved in the future, so we have the same extra fee field. But for now, we're going to say send params, and our fee. It's going to be algokit.algos. Oh, I don't know why I put that in object. Fee is going to be algokit.algos 0.003. So one for the outer, one for the asset close, one for the algo transfer. Now, if we go ahead and try to run that again, we can see that we've deleted our app and our app ID was reset to 0. Okay. So now what I want to do is I want to, so let's actually go, I guess I have to create a new app. Okay, so our unitary price will be 2. Create it. And let me get sold out here. Oh, I forgot. This needs to be 8. Okay, so now that we have 0 units left, we're seeing both sold out and deleteApp. What I want to happen is have conditional logic depending on who's connected. And this is a very common pattern for front ends. So basically what I need to do is I first need to implement a way to determine who the seller actually is. So who the creator of the app is. And to do that, we're going to go up to our use effect. And we're going to, here after we did all the stuff for our state, we're going to use our Algorand client.algod, and we are going to get application by ID, and we're going to pass in our app ID. We're going to .do, and then we're going to call it .then, and we're going to get the response, and in our response, we're going to set seller to response.params.creator. Okay, and we need to create the set seller, so const seller set seller equals use state string. Okay, this will be string or undefined. Okay. And so now what we're doing is whenever the app ID changes, we're going to see who the creator of the app was. And so now in our logic here, if our active address, so the address we connected, is not equal to the seller, then we'll show sold out. However, if our active address is equal to the seller, then we'll show the delete application. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead, create our app. I'm going to go ahead and buy 10. And because I'm currently connected as the seller, I'm seeing delete app. If I were to disconnect, I would see sold out. Connect back, I can see delete app, and then I can delete the application. Okay. So I think at this point we have covered everything. The one thing I don't know is where this extra 0 is coming from. So let me see if I can quickly figure out where that's coming from. So that's after our unitary price. Unitary price. Oh, this is. I think that's where it's coming from. Yeah, okay. So at this point, we've kind of gone through how we can do interface that changes dynamically depending on the state of our application and depending on who is connected. So to kind of walk you through the whole flow again, I come here, the app ID is 0. I can go ahead and create a new marketplace where to find the unitary price. Right now we're hard coding it at 10 units. And as a user, I can come in here, I can buy 1 unit, I could buy multiple units. And if we're sold out, as the creator or the seller, I have the option to delete the app. And if I'm just a regular end user that wasn't the creator, I'll just see the sold out. Now, of course, like I said, there are multiple different ways you can go from here. The point of this video wasn't to show you how to make the prettiest front end, because obviously I'm not the best person to do that. But the point of this video was to show you how we can integrate Algorand into a front end framework like React and use things like current chain state and application state and connected addresses to dynamically render components that interact with the smart contract that we've created. And this is all happening on the backbone of our generated client. So at this time, what I recommend you to do is you can play around a little bit more and add more features to this. The first thing you might want to add is in the looks like I forgot to connect my wallet. That would be why. Is in the create app, you want to specify a thing for quantity. Or maybe you want to even go a step further and mint your own assets. In the beginner course, we aren't going to be going too deep into assets, but in the intermediate course, we'll be going more in depth into assets and how we can mint them and how we can follow NFT standards so they can show all pretty in your wallet. But for the beginner, this concludes the content that we're going over in this video series. So if you enjoyed this video series, definitely stay in tune for our intermediate bootcamp. If you're following along in the live bootcamp, the intermediate will be shortly after. If you're watching on YouTube, just check our YouTube channel to see if we've posted the intermediate content yet already. If not, then it should be posted shortly. I hope you all have enjoyed this series. And as always, if you have any questions about any of the content that we covered or how you can go forward and expand on this content for yourself, please join our Discord, discord.gg/Algorand, and you can find myself and all my colleagues there that are happy to answer questions. Like I said, hopefully you found this useful, and I will see you in the next intermediate series if you are brave enough to continue on. Bye, everyone.
All right, so that concludes the beginner bootcamp for building on Algorand with TypeScript. Of course, there's a lot of different ways you can continue building using what we built today. So we highly encourage you to do that, maybe even use it for the hackathon. And as you encounter any questions along the way, definitely come to our Discord. I'll put a link in the chat. And that is where you can get support from us. Basically, at any time you have an issue with Algorand, we are there to help you, along with many members in the community as well. I don't think I saw any questions. Yeah, I think I don't think we
No,
have.
so Joe, thanks, and all the DevRel team who prepared the content of this bootcamp. It's very useful resource for those who want to create a project in Algorand. And sometimes I feel that there is a lot of content to process, but then I remember how useful it is, and I keep watching the videos and try to understand step by step. So all the support that you can give us, guys, creating content, creating articles with the same structure of the bootcamp can be meaningful, because sometimes we don't have enough hands to create content to several audience. The idea of this bootcamp is to create a functional marketplace so you can replicate, but there are too many basics projects that you also can create. You can share with us your repository, so we can all work together, and we have a lot of new developer tooling that can help us to speed up the process. What is next? So I will share with you the certificate, the link so you can claim the certificate. Hold on a second. And how you claim it? How is the process? I will share my screen. One moment. QR code. But what happened with the QR code? One moment, please. Kind of thing that happens on live events. So you can scan this QR code, but you need to do it with your camera, not with Pera Wallet. Otherwise, you will receive an error, because this is a web page QR code, not a wallet one. So over here, don't forget the dates for the upcoming bootcamps. This is the process to claim the certificate. So with the camera, you will scan the QR code. Then you will get redirected to the Go Plausible website. You click the proceed to claim. You will need at least 0.22 algos to do this process. If you have any issue claiming the certificate, you can send me an email. I will share with you my email over here. And once you press the button to claim the certificate, you just need to select your Pera wallet. In my case, you can also do using DFly. And then you must select one account, the account that you want to use to claim the certificate. Usually in this step, you need to go back to the Explorer that you are using to connect to Go Plausible website. And then you must see something like this. Over there, you press the button claim the certificate. You need to sign the transaction. And after a few seconds, once you go back to your Pera wallet and sign the transaction, if you go to the NFT tab in the bottom of Pera wallet, you will see a certificate like this one. In my case, this wallet already claimed a lot of certificates, but if that is your first certificate, you will just see one NFT. So that is the process. These certificates are transferable or are freezed? I don't know. I need to take a look, to be honest with you. I need to do the demo to identify if you can transfer the certificate. I will take a look. And how you can add the certificate to your LinkedIn profile. You need to go to the Go Plausible website and scan with your Pera wallet to connect to the Go Plausible website, and then I just scanning the QR code. It is the first time that you are interacting with Go Plausible. You need to opt in. You need, as you can see, you need to authorize to start interacting with the application. Then sign the transaction. and you will see the certificate that you just claimed. You just need to recheck the claim. This is just the first time. And afterwards, hold on a second, sorry. The option to add to your LinkedIn profile will appear. I just press the add to the LinkedIn. You must do it in your laptop or desktop, because in that way you can communicate with LinkedIn. And over here, by default, it brings the information for the certificate, when it was issued, the organization. I just press next, and you can share with your network the certificate. By default, LinkedIn add this image, but you can add a custom one. So how do you do it? You press the X and then you upload the image from your computer. Oh, I need to discuss with MG about that so he can implement that. By default, the certificates must be frozen, because that is a pretty interesting functionality. So in that way, you can claim the certificate. Joe, there is something else that you want to share with us?
No, I think we're ready to go on, and hope to see everyone here in the hackathon.
That is the next step. And also create content. You can help us to create content, create tutorials. There are too many things that we can create using AlgoKit, in this case TypeScript. So looking forward to seeing you in the intermediate sessions. Thank you so much and have a good one.
Thanks, everyone.